So if you guys remember last year, we did two different coaches roundtables, both pertain to boys basketball here in the state of West Virginia. We did a veteran one when we had Mick Price, Dave Rogers, and Rick Green. And in our second one, we did Dave Tallman, Scott Soro, and Zach Green. But this time, we're going to go down a lot of different avenues. Over these next couple of episodes, we're going to do some different roundtables. As you can see, I am joined by three girls coaches. I'll introduce them here in 1 second. But we'll do a girls basketball roundtable. We'll do a boys basketball roundtable. Then eventually, that will lead to a retired coaches roundtable, hopefully, where we get some older knowledge and perspective on the game of basketball and how it's grown since they stepped away from the game of basketball here in the state of West Virginia. So, again, episode 144 of Hoops Across the Mountain State is underway, and let's dive right in by introducing each of our three guests for this roundtable. We'll start with the head coach, the veteran head coach of the George Washington Patriots. He is entering his 19th season, over 250 career wins, two-time MSAC Coach of the Year, reached the state tournament 7 times at GW, reached the state semifinals 5 times, head coach Jamie LeMaster. Then we are also joined by John Kennedy, who's entering his 10th season as the Ripley girls head basketball coach, over 115 career wins at Ripley, got the Vikings to the state tournament for the first time in his tenure as the head coach, reaching the state semifinals. He is a graduate of Ripley High School. Then last but not least, Mr. Pat Jones, the girls head basketball coach at Nitro. He's entering his 7th season as the Lady Wildcats head coach. He is the 2021 class AAA state champion with that team when they finished 17-1 that season. And Nitro has advanced to the state tournament in 3 of the last 4 seasons. So gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Great crowd we got going on.
It's a pleasure to be joined by
everybody's
you guys.
Quiet all of a sudden.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Coach Kennedy, how are you?
Doing well. I appreciate you, Taylor. I was letting these other guys go ahead there before me, especially Coach LeMaster's there, since he's the veteran coach out of all of us here. You know, got to respect the age.
What a resume. I was sitting here. I had to look at my watch. I thought we were just going to be here for a while talking about his resume.
Well, we had to get him out of here quick because you gotta go get the early bird special tomorrow afternoon at Shoney. So we gotta take care of that later. But no, I'm just messing. It's all love. It's all love. But if the audience remembers the format for what happened last year, we went down a lot of different areas. And as everybody knows, there's been a lot of news and nuggets in regards to high school sports and especially high school basketball here in the state of West Virginia. So a lot of different avenues that we are going to go down. Just to give a little bit of context, we'll talk about the 4-class system again, because again, we just finished another year with the 4-class system here in the state of West Virginia for both boys and girls basketball. We'll talk about what everybody loves to talk about, the high school transfer portal, because that bill is now a law. So we'll talk about that coming up. We'll talk about community support. We'll talk about building a program. We'll go down a lot of different avenues. So I'm excited to hear and where we go. But let's start with the hot topic. Let's kind of play some hot potato here to start off, guys. And Coach LeMaster, I'll start with you. Obviously, a lot of people know about this high school transfer portal that is now a law. It got tied in with the Hope Scholarship. Just kind of let's take it from a macro, and we'll kind of dissect it as we go along. But just kind of give me your general thoughts. What are your thoughts on it? Do you like it? What do you think is wrong with it? Kind of just walk me through what you're thinking.
Well, Taylor, we had talked earlier, and the last time we spoke, the last conversation we had, I said, ultimately, I have to be against it. I think we've seen the damage it's done in college sports. You see now, I think college coaches are not recruiting high school kids as much as they are just recruiting the portal. Now, on the high school level, I think it's going to do damage because to this point currently, I have more questions than answers. I have yet to be given the perimeters of what we're allowed to do and not do, what kids can do and can't do. But I do understand both sides of it. You know, kids want to go where they can be best served, what they think is best for them. The other side says, what are we teaching kids? When they face adversity or tough situations, they just up and leave. So I do understand both sides of it. But in my day, being the older guy here as a player, we were taught to be accountable. You played for coach. and you played for program, and there was, I think the biggest thing is loyalty. And I'm not sure that this bill is putting loyalty first to program with kids. We're in the baby stages of it, but I'm just afraid it's going to lead to more questions than there are answers. And what are we really teaching kids here?
Coach Kennedy, I thought Coach Lemaster brought up a lot of good points, and we'll talk more about this later on, about the community support and everything else. And for people that were at the state tournament, both for the boys and girls state tournament, I thought Ripley brought a terrific crowd for both tournaments. So my question to you is, and Coach Lemaster mentioned the L word, and that's loyalty. For a guy that's in one of the smaller communities in Southern West Virginia over in Jackson County with the town of Ripley, how important is it for you to continue to preach loyalty whenever they do have this bill that is now a law and they do have an opportunity to go somewhere else? How often do you preach that, and what does that tie into where you're at with the program?
You know, when it comes to our community and you're talking about loyalty, I experienced it here when I played at Ripley back in the mid to late 90s there, and had the opportunity to go play at the state tournament, and our fans came out in full support then. And then, as you just mentioned, you know, our community, I mean, there were bus drivers, moms, dads, cooks, custodians, administrators, kids all the way down to elementary school that were coming out to support these girls. And it just speaks volumes for little small rural towns in West Virginia, you know, where Coach Masters and Coach Jones are sitting down there in the Kanawha Valley. They got a bunch of schools right there. And when you're talking about this transfer portal a little bit, makes it a little bit easier down there in the Kanawha Valley to go recruit. But I'm going to be honest, there's not too many schools up here in Jackson County that kids are wanting to jump ship to. And when you're the head coach of a program, you preach that loyalty and commitment and dedication, not only to the coaching staff, to the team, you know, and I tell them all the time, you know, you're a part of the family forever in Viking Nation. And they've got to remember that not only are they playing for themselves or parents, but they've got to remember that they're playing for the school and our community that came out to support those girls this season and in years past. And it's going to be tough for some of us small schools to compete with the transfer portal. But like Coach Lemaster said, you know, there's still a lot of unanswered questions that we all have when it comes to that.
Yeah, it's a lot of good points. And Coach Jones, I'll go to you. So we talk about these questions, and I know Coach Lemaster may have some questions that he would want to talk about here in a second, but what questions, if any, do you have about this, just to get some more clarification on this and trying to just get some clarity as to what coaches are allowed to do, what is even allowed to happen to begin with? Do you have questions about it? Walk us through that.
I mean, honestly, I agree with everything that Coach Lemaster said. And I mean, we've talked about it before. I think it's all just a big cluster right now. And I don't think we'll ever get the true answers until we go out and, you know, someone comes to us and says, hey, you know, my daughter's interested in transferring to your school. You know, what do we got to do? Because right now, I don't think any of us coaches would even, if they asked us that, I don't think we would know the answer. And I don't even know that our administration would know the answer if if it was brought to our attention. So I think it's all new. But like I said earlier, I don't think you're going to see it affect girls sports as much as it's going to affect the boys sports, boys side of it. But I mean, question wise, you know, I mean, how does it work if you transfer from, we'll just say one of my girls transfer from Nitro, which is their home school, to another school, and that's their free transfer. Well, if they transfer back to Nitro, do they have to, I mean, they still live in the Nitro district. So how does that, I mean, do they get to go back to their home school? Do they have to sit out a year? You know, is that considered their home school and they can go back to that school for free? Like, I mean, I don't understand how it works. I mean, just for instance, say Ava Edwards decides that she wants to transfer to South Charleston. Okay, well, there's her free transfer. But what if she decides after her junior year she wasn't happy and she wants to transfer back to Nitro, but she still lives in the Nitro district when she left? Does she, is that our home school? Does she automatically get a free transfer? Does she have to sit out a year? You know, I mean, I don't think that this has been cleared up enough to answer all the questions that people are going to have. And I'm sure that someone's going to transfer and it's going to be done wrong, or something's going to be done incorrectly. And then it's going to be us as coaches we're going to be the ones that get in trouble for it.
Coach Lemaster, I see you shaking your head. I'll get to you in a second, but I want to go back to what Pat had just said. And you had mentioned something, and you mentioned this earlier before we got on here during our 30-minute long pre-production meeting, but you mentioned how you think this won't affect girls basketball as much as it would boys basketball. I'm interested. I'm curious as to why you think that is. Why is that?
Was that for Coach Lemaster?
That was for you. I'm sorry.
All
Coach.
for me?
Yeah, my bad.
I really don't know. I think that probably because boys sports, I feel like, are a lot more competitive. It's about the only way that I can really take it. Not saying that girls sports aren't competitive, but you know, I just think that boys you'll see more of a jump on the boys side than you will, you know, the girls side. And it could come down more to the loyalty side, like, you know, Coach Lemaster said. But I don't know, I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, it may be girls that, you know, hit the portal like crazy. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, you know, here. And I don't think you're really going to see anything until after the June 3-week period. I think that's once these kids get with their teams and, you know, they see how it's going to work out, see what they've got coming back compared to other teams that are out there. I think that's when you're going to see, you know, more of your, you know, your portal get hot.
Coach Lemaster, I'll go to you. So you mentioned earlier, whenever I first asked you what your thoughts were, and you said that you do have questions. I know I kind of asked Coach Jones a similar question about it, but just kind of expand on what you were meaning earlier in your opening statement. What questions do you have, if you don't mind sharing?
Okay, so other than myself and other coaches at George Washington High School sitting around talking, and I know Coach Jones mentioned it, Kanawha County currently gives an 8th to 9th grade free transfer. Okay. Now, once they take that, are they allowed to get the second transfer? Once they get there, from what I understand, they don't. They either get to 8th and 9th, or they get once they get the high school transfer. Now, the other thing is, my understanding is the home school is gone. So to Coach Jones's point, a kid leaves Nitro and hypothetically goes to South Charleston and wants to come back. The home school, that kid has to set 365. Here's another question. Let's say that kid does a 8th and 9th and then uses or waits and uses that transfer. Now, if that kid is now at South Charleston, let's say they want to go to Herbert Hoover and the family moves to the Herbert Hoover district, what now? If I live in district, opinion, I should be eligible to play. So there's just a lot of questions out there that have not been answered yet. So currently, coaches are sitting around talking about a lot of hypotheticals, and we just don't have any. I need something on paper with the rule written out that tells me what we can and can't do before not only myself in trouble, but more importantly, before I cause a kid a problem. And
I agree. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions that we probably won't have. We may never get the answer to. It'll be one of those where it just happened, and your administration is going to come to you and say, "Oh yeah, no, we just found out this can't happen."
And then I'm sorry, right? So your point, Coach Jones, I know at GW, our boys team has movement. I know of 2 players that have come in from other schools. I know our football team has enrolled kids currently, and these kids came like in the last 2 weeks. Once this took effect, there were kids moving, excuse me, and enrolling, and we're like 4 or 5 weeks out from school being done, and these kids are showing up full blown, enrolled, completely eligible. So to your point, yes, I've seen much more movement on the boys' side than I have the girls' side, because quite honestly, there's been no movement at GW on the girls' side of basketball. There's been no movement.
Coach Kennedy, I'll go to you, and I'll kind of tie in what I asked you initially about this whole loyalty thing. And I'm curious because I've talked to college coaches about this before, and I kind of understand where they're coming from, but from a girls' high school basketball coach perspective, do you have to approach how you communicate and how you bring up players in this new day and age, now that we do have this high school transfer portal here in the state of West Virginia?
Well, I mean, my main focus is, of course, on our girls and, what our program's about. And within our pre-practice meetings, through practice, and even in the off season, we do talk about that loyalty and staying committed and believing in the process. And we had a lot of girls that started out with us as freshmen. They've bought in, and good things happened for us there last year. to where we were, a couple seconds, playing in that state championship game. So I really don't focus a lot of attention on this transfer portal. I'm just staying true to, what we've done in years past. And, we've lost some girls to some other schools in my tenure as a head coach. I'm not going to change who I am or how I do things because of the transfer portal. And, if I know all these other guys, Coach LeMaster and Coach Jones, if a young lady decides that she's not happy where she is, how can you penalize a young lady that wants to come to your school when even though you preach loyalty and all the things about a program, how are you going to turn a kid away when you're talking about this transfer portal and where they have that opportunity now where they never had before? So we're all in a little different area right now on how to deal with this transfer portal. And if players come to us, we just got to be extremely knowledgeable of the process and make sure we follow it to the T.
Coach Jones, I'll go to you because I thought something that Coach Kennedy said right there about that process and how it's almost like people have to remain open-minded about it. I know that's a very broad way of saying it. It can either be a negative or a positive way of looking at it. But when you do look at this transfer portal here in West Virginia, a lot of the questions are, well, why are we having this for such a small populated state? And then you remain open-minded about, well, you're doing what's best for your team as well, but also what's best for the players, and it's up to the players and all that. But kind of structuring what I asked Coach Kennedy, do you have to approach it differently now? I mean, do you have to kind of have those one-on-one talks now where you're like, okay, well, what's on your mind? Do you have to approach it differently? Walk me through that.
I mean, yeah, I definitely do, especially this year in particular, just because, I mean, I only lost one player last year in Taylor Maddox. And so I'm returning 11 girls, and I've got 8 freshmen coming from a middle school team. And, the community has really bought in at Nitro, including from the middle school to the grade schools and everything like that. And so it's different when a girl from outside wants to come in. I mean, obviously, you don't want to really, I don't want to say turn anyone down. I know that sounds terrible to say. But I also think that, you've got to keep your commitment to, your feeder schools and those that are coming in and, that have been there since day one, have really been helping you and things like that. But at the same time, I mean, and I'm sure these coaches will agree with me, if a Bailey Goins were to enroll at Ripley High School or GW High School, there's a lot of considerations you got to take into play. And, but at the same time, I also think that someone of that talent or, someone with any talent coming in, it's also going to help push your girls and make them better and make them want to compete to, to still remain a starter or to remain that role player that may be the first or second player off the bench. So I think it can help, but at the same time, I also think it can hurt, the community if you've got girls from everywhere coming in to, and knocking girls off that have been there for 3 or 4 years or that have, been excited from middle school up waiting to get to high school, and then they get the opportunity and someone comes in and kind of steals their position.
Coach LeMaster, I'll go to you. Again, you've been coaching for a long time now. You're entering your 19th season as George Washington's girls head basketball coach. When you look back at when you first started as a coach at GW to where it is now, obviously this is a big moment in not only your career, but everybody's career being a head coach here in West Virginia. But kind of just walk me back through what the landscape of high school basketball looked like if something like this were to happen and this were to pop up. How would Jamie LeMaster approach this 19 years ago compared to where we are now?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. I think first off, I think this movement's been going on for a long time. And when I say that, I mean those that could did, those that couldn't didn't, because you had to move in district. I think something we've been talking about, and a thought just crossed my mind, is if I'm a college coach with a senior or a high school coach with an underclassman coming in, let's say they're on their second, third school, are there some red flags that come up there? Why is this kid not sticking? It makes you just think about the kid and maybe looking a little more at the kid. But back when I first started, if you got a kid, they either came in from out of state or out of county, there wasn't a whole lot of movement. Now, with that said, and I'm going to show my age here a little bit, I remember the year that I'm talking to Renee Hornbuckles and, Montgomery's went from Capital to South Charleston, won state titles at both places. It was a rarity that happened. I think you're seeing more of an uptick to that now. Kids are moving, and like I said, it's been going all along. Now it's just been made legal. So that's the difference. So how I deal with it now, I really can't say because I haven't had enough of a sample size to deal with because it's just currently became law. But like I said, when you see kids moving around, jumping around, I think honestly, there could be some red flags there, like what is going on here, and especially as a college coach. Let's use, for example, back in the day, a kid would not play for their high school, but would play travel basketball for whatever reason. If I'm a college coach, why you're not playing for your high school? So those are just some things, show my age a little bit, but those are some questions I would have.
Coach Kenny, I'll end this topic with you before we move on, but I thought everybody's been giving a lot of great information about this as of you. But when you look at your playing days, because as you mentioned, you're a graduate of Ripley, you made the state tournament as a player as well. Coach Jones was also a player that made it to the state tournament as well when he played at Capital. But focusing on you, when you look at it from a player's perspective, kind of take me back to when you played. I know conversations obviously happen as Coach Lemaster said, this has definitely happened, but now it's in stone, it's a law. But from a player's perspective, since you are able to interact with your team and kind of connect with them a lot more than a lot of other coaches statewide would, but from a player's perspective, take me back and kind of put me in your shoes. If you're a player, what's going through your head with this whole process? What are you thinking? And how would you approach it if a young John Kennedy was still playing?
Good question. Put me on the spot there on that one.
Man.
Man. Backing up about 4 or 5 years ago when I played, no, I'm just messing with all you guys. I know you're all looking at me like this guy's crazy. It was different then for me. When I played for Coach A and Coach Richie Skeens that you guys all know, coming into that program, we were loyal as can be. And we believed in, the dreams and the goals that the coaches had for, the program and for players. And, there was, with the guys that I played with, there was no hesitation about us even thinking about transferring to Ravenswood or playing for another school. Once the coaches got a hold of us, we were bought in big time. But when you're talking, if I'm in, 16, 17-year-old John Kennedy at Ripley High School, there's definitely questions out there and concerns, not with Coach Mullins or any of the coaches that they have there now. Those guys are awesome. But just me personally speaking, that's extremely tough for 15, 16, 17-year-old kid to be put through, to where you've got, if I had some talent, which I had a little bit of, wasn't allowed to shoot. I was a facilitator, but you've got coaches that are reaching out to other players, and you've got community members reaching out to them. And, if they would have come at me, kids definitely have to at least honor that. And they should, feel a sense of pride about their ability, and that they've worked on their game and their craft and taken themselves to another level where other coaches are trying to get them. And, with this transfer portal making it wide open, how can you fault another coach for trying to go out there to improve their team and get them to the state tournament? So coaches just have to keep an open mind about this whole transfer portal. And, everybody wants to win, get that state tournament, and, be the best you can. And, I would definitely, as a player, have to keep an open mind as well, but I was raised a little bit different, you know, and I know these guys were too, but we were all raised old school, and you played for your elementary school league, you know, your Betty Ball, your youth leagues, and your middle school, and then you just moved right on over to the high school. So it wasn't that big of an issue. And me personally, you know, I believe in loyalty. And that's a huge thing with me within our program, that I want players coming in from our feeder system over to middle school to buy in wholeheartedly and to be there in the off season and have the blood, sweat, and tears and to bleed blue.
So I got one more question, and this is for everybody about this topic, and this is something I've kind of wrestled with asking, kind of just constructing this question. But again, this is for anybody, so anybody can answer it. But with this portal now becoming a law here in the state, I'm curious from a coach's perspective, with that portal becoming a law, are we starting to see the spark and a little bit of that magic that makes West Virginia high school basketball so unique and different? Are we starting to see that not completely fade away, but it's like a little dimmer, and it's slowly getting there, and they're kind of sitting back and they're saying, is this the right thing to do? Is this what's best for these student athletes? Are we losing that spark and that interest?
Well, Taylor, can I go first, please?
Absolutely.
I want to follow up
Better.
on something Kennedy was talking about. And I think what you're seeing with this transfer portal is, listen to Coach Kennedy talk. He talked about growing up in a community. You know, you go to that area, and respectfully, there's, you know, between the schools, there's Ripley and there's Ravenswood. Here in the Kanawha Valley, we have 8 high schools, six quad A and 2 double or triple. You throw in Charleston Catholic, that's 9. So that really kills your sense of loyalty now, because it's spread so far, man. I mean, if you look around, you know, Morgantown High School won the state 4A girls this year. It's either them or University. Go down to Huntington area, it's Huntington or it's Cabell Midland. You know, we have too many high schools here in the Valley. It's so wide open, it's spread so thin. There truly is no sense of loyalty here in the Valley. You've got schools 15 minutes apart, you know, and you can go to any one of them. And if you get out in some of these other areas, and you know, I understand and respect, but when you get out in some of these areas like where Coach Kennedy's at, there is a much, much stronger sense of loyalty. Because I'm sure coming up, Coach, if a kid defected to Ravenswood, that guy's out, man. Don't come to my party. Don't hang out with me. We're not hanging. You know, that guy, he defected. Down here in this valley, 9 high schools in one county, man, that just, and they're all so close. There really is no true sense of loyalty, or even for that matter, I'll step out and say community, because they all overrun each other.
I agree. I mean, you might as well say Capital, GW, Riverside, St. Albans, Nitro, South Charleston, all within 15-mile radius, 20-mile radius, probably.
Agree.
So it definitely makes the loyalty thing a lot more harder. So, but I mean, is there another high school near you, John? I just know of Ripley up that way. I mean, I know Ravenswood is a couple exits up, but I mean, anything within like a small vicinity of Ripley?
I mean, you've got your other counties that surround us. You got Rome County, you got PHS, Parkersburg South, Wahama, Point.
But they're more than like 10, 15 minutes away, basically.
One of those, I'm saying.
Yeah. Like, I think like South Charleston, GW, and Capital are basically an exit between each other, pretty much.
It's a revolving door.
Yeah. No, I agree with what LeMaster said. It definitely makes it harder, you know, down this way, because there's so many schools within a small vicinity of each other.
Coach Kennedy, what care to weigh in?
I mean, both those guys, I agree with what they said. I'm in a little different situation up here, out here in rural Jackson County. You know, I mean, there has been some kids that have, you know, transferred from Ripley, Ravenswood, maybe went to PHS or Parkersburg South. I mean, a lot of our wrestlers head up there to those schools. And then, you know, I've had some girls in the past that's went down to Sissonville on me. So, you know, I understand where they're coming from, where it's just an open door, like Coach Masters, Coach Jones are saying, where, you know, it's just revolving with those athletes down there. And it could happen anywhere across the state, but it's not going to affect Ripley High School that much. I can promise you that.
Well, Coach, I envy you for that, because like you have that strong sense of community. There's not a lot of other places. And I mean that truly respectfully. I mean, you can really build that sense of team pride, like you said, coming up from elementary, middle school, high school. I mean, that's a rarity. And if you look at these schools around the state who are winning, it's not spread so thin. I mean, you've done a tremendous job there. And I'm sure, again, I envy your job in the fact that you can get out in those elementaries and middle schools and see those kids and be there, because there's not 8 other options. I envy that. I think it's just there's too many down here. And again, this new law is going to cause a whole lot of problems. Like I said, more questions than answers.
Just to piggyback on what you said, McKinnon Hall, that was my 4-year starting point guard. That young lady started out in our youth league, middle school, bought in with everything that we were doing in the program. And then what a special way to go out for that girl is to be playing at the state tournament her senior year. I mean, that's awesome. And that's what you hope that your program builds, and it shows everybody else in your community that, you know, the steps are in place and they just got to believe in it. And, you know, I tell our girls all the time that there's no substitute for work, you know, and that young lady was just awesome. And I've got a soft spot for that girl, you know, being a wee little kid in 2nd and 3rd grade, watching her play, and now she's graduating on me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think this kind of transitions us into the next topic I really wanted to talk about, because this is something that I've definitely seen from afar, being a member of the media, especially these last couple of years. And I think we're starting to see a boom. I think girls basketball in the States is definitely having a moment. Coach LeMaster mentioned Renee Montgomery and Alexis Hornbuckle, 2 of the state's greatest girls basketball players of all time. But now you're seeing this wave, and I think all 3 of you have produced such great talent. I know Coach Kinney just mentioned McKinnon Hall. He's returning some good talent. So it's Coach Jones and Coach LeMaster as well. But again, this is open for anybody, so anybody can start off. But do you all think girls basketball here in the state of West Virginia is having a moment?
I do. I've only been doing it, coaching girls basketball this will be my 7th year, but no, I really think girls basketball has really came a long way since, you know, I've been around. I didn't really follow girls basketball before that, except for, like you said, you know, the Hornbuckle Montgomery days. I never really followed girls basketball that much, but since I have been coaching, I feel like every year, I feel like girls basketball is taking a step forward and a step up, I guess is the best way to put it. You don't know night in and night out, especially and Coach Kennedy will agree with me here, you know, in the Cardinal Conference. I mean, alone, the type of games that you're playing night in and night out. When I first was at Nitro, you know, you might have had 3 or 4 games that were pretty difficult, but now it's the Cardinal Conference is night in and night out, just because I think girls see, you know, like Ripley's and the GWs and the Nitros, you know, they get that opportunity to get to the state tournament, and it makes them hungrier. And, you know, it makes them want that opportunity to get there too. And I think a lot of these girls are playing more travel basketball and, you know, getting in the gym more in the off season. And, you know, they're wanting their opportunity, just like, you know, Sissonville this year. Sissonville made the state tournament last year, and I think they got beat by like 60 or 70 to Fairmont Senior in the first game. And then they came out this year and, you know, they were minutes away from basically playing for a state championship. So, you know, and that just goes to show what, you know, Coach McClanahan has done at Sissonville in the off season. I mean, they got there, they got beat, but they didn't tuck their heads. You know, they were in the gym working all season, travel ball, weight rooms, you know, those type of things. And I think that's the difference you're seeing nowadays in girls basketball, is that girls basketballs are, and it has a lot to do with coaching also. I think the coaches are a lot more involved. And, you know, I was told that next year they're doing away with the 12 flex days, or 13, however many you get, and they're bumping it to 32 flex days. So, you know, you're going to see coaches getting a lot more involved. And I think it's going to put a lot of stress with the transfer portal on athletic directors and principals and things like that. I think they're going to have to find, you know, coaches that know the game of basketball and understand the game of basketball to start hiring them to coach their girls, since you don't have to be a teacher anymore. Because I think that, you know, some of these teachers that just want that extra paycheck, and no disrespect to them, I don't blame them. I'd want the extra paycheck too. But I think you're going to start losing your key players and stuff to these schools that are having opportunities to go to the state tournament because they have coaches that care about the kids and want to get out there and, you know, work with them and get them better and get them that opportunity to be seen and be noticed instead of just going out to, you know, get you a $1,500 paycheck in March.
Man, I'm sitting up here in Jackson County high on the hog. I mean, I know you guys down there in Kanawha Valley. I mean, I remember the Honorable Coach Scott James sending around a petition during the 3-week period years ago. And I know Coach LeMasters was in on it and lobbying for a pay raise down there. And I didn't hesitate at all to sign that thing and put my John Hancock on there, try to help you boys out down there.
I coached Scott James against Scott James 1 year, and then he retired.
He's a heck of a good man. I took some lumps from him when he was coaching there at St. Albans. But one thing I'd like to add to Coach Jones is people like you, Taylor, that are involving us coaches to promote our programs and our girls. And social media has just exploded the exposure for these girls. And I struggle a little bit with social media. I've got some people that help me out and do an awesome job with it to promoting, you know, our program, you know, during season, off season, stuff like that. But, you know, being old school, where I don't have a lot of social media, it's definitely helped out to, you know, get these girls noticed across the state, other states, and when they're playing travel ball and helping out in the recruiting process going into college. So I'd like to say thank you to you and everybody else involved in West Virginia State for girls basketball and promoting them in a very positive manner.
Coach Master, anything to add?
Well, I think, again, I'm going to show my age a little bit, but there was a time when girls basketball played in the fall alongside football. Now, how is girls basketball going to compete with football for notoriety in the fall? So it was kind of an afterthought. So then, you know, it moved forward and now we're in the winter season. But I think Coach Jones used a great word, an opportunity. Now today, you know, I'll give us, for example, let's start at the beginning of the school year. We put in 12 weeks in the weight room in the preseason. We use our flex days during that time. During that, we're playing a 7-week fall league period that we host at GW. That goes right up until about a week before the season starts. The season goes for 20 plus games. Then you get out of that and maybe you take some time off. And for example, we're going to go back in the weight room next Tuesday, every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And my kids are playing travel basketball. So I just think there's so many more opportunities now. The kids are so much more involved. And it's forced some of these coaches to be more involved because, like Coach Jones said, the days of showing up and just getting a paycheck and getting out, if you do that, you're not going to be successful and you're going to lose kids. So it is basically like a 10-month commitment now, as opposed to, like I said, to start this, we're playing alongside football in the fall season and we're an afterthought. So I just think it's just grown tremendously over the years.
So that kind of leads me into, we continue to mention this G word, that's growth. And obviously since 2020, this 4-class system has definitely been a big storyline each and every season with a lot of movement. We'll obviously have some reclassification this year leading into next season, but I'm curious as to what you all say. Again, I'm going to open this up, and I know the audience is like, why do you keep doing this? Well, it's an opportunity for everybody to give their opinion on this. And I've talked, I even mentioned this to Bernie Dolan, the executive director of the SSAC, in our last episode about this question. So I'll ask you all this. Does West Virginia, again, I'm gonna use the same sentence that I said earlier, but with a state with not a big population, but does this state need a 4-class system? Anybody can start.
No.
Why is that?
It's stupid. There's not that many schools here. The state is not that big. The SSAC did this for an extra day of ticket sales at the state tournament. Let's be realistic here. And all they really had to do was cut out the 9 a.m. and the 9 p.m. games. You could have added an extra day and still had 3 classes. Then you don't have kids coming to the Civic Center at 8 o'clock in the morning, leaving at 5 and 6 in the morning to get to games. You can get there and you can still have your 11 o'clock game or whatever, 11:15, whatever the next game is after the 9 o'clock game. And then you're not leaving the Civic Center at 11:30 at night to get home by 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I just personally, I think it was all money hungry. They wanted that extra day of tickets, so that's why they added an extra day and they added an extra class. Because you could have easily canceled a morning game and an evening game and still had the same amount of games in 3 classes and used 4 days. I don't think there's enough schools in this state to have 4 classes.
Well, a little bit of a different perspective. I agree with a lot of things that Coach Jones said. I think it does create more revenue. It hasn't affected me as much in 4A and Quad A, whichever term is correct. Coach Kennedy, you'll tell me if I'm right or wrong, because it really didn't change for 4A. Because we play the same guys. I think you, maybe Bridgeport stayed 3A, or maybe just you stayed 3A. Is that correct?
I think it was us and Bridgeport. There might have been another school or two in there, but I'll let you finish, because I'm going to give the other side of the 4 classes because we benefited from it.
Okay, exactly. So for us as GW, it didn't change much. I'm playing the same guys that I always played, minus maybe 1 or 2. I think the initial reason it was done was it was to help the small schools get the opportunity and get the private schools away from them. Let's be honest. Because before this happened, it was St. Joe, with all due respect, St. Joe, Wheeling Central, Charleston Catholic. Those guys were winning like the small school tournaments. I myself went to a small school. Now I coach at a big school. So, for example, I see more kids in my health class every day than the entire enrollment at Tigers Valley High School. So for those guys get the opportunity to come to Charleston, it's a dream come true for them, because truthfully, what happens at Tigers Valley is you'll get a good run of kids. You won't see that run of kids for maybe 12, 15 years later. So it hasn't affected the big schools as much. I think it's given the opportunity to the smaller schools to get a chance to go, the more rural schools. But also, like Pat Jones says, I also understand that's created an extra day of revenue too. So I truly kind of see both sides of it. But it hasn't affected the big schools near as much as it's affected you guys and like the smaller schools, smaller than you guys. So that's just my take on that.
Yeah, and Coach Lemasters, he knows he and I competed when Ripley was the smallest AAA in the state, and we were playing in the MSAC. And Coach Lemasters has whipped me every time we've played but 1 game. So it just goes to show you. I mean, he's a heck of a coach, and so isn't Coach Jones. But the opportunities that these kids get at GW or Nitro with different training facilities and the access to it, when you're talking about Ripley, some of these kids don't have that same opportunity and access to some of, what those Kanawha Valley schools do. And it'd been, I think, 13 years since the girls had taken a trip to Charleston with Coach Hunt. And I think there's only 3 or 4 years in Ripley High School history that the girls have ever made it to the state tournament. So, I understand where Coach Jones is coming from, but, on the other side, I'm extremely fortunate and thankful that they did go to the 4 classes.
And I agree with what you all are saying also. But did we really need 4 classes to do that? I mean, could we not have just brought Ripley and Bridgeport to AAA and just kept it the same? And we didn't. There weren't that many. Were there that many schools that really changed classes? I mean, could we have not just kept Ripley in the AAA and moved everybody to 4? I mean, you know what I mean? Instead of adding like an extra class. I mean, I don't understand. Like, that's the part that confuses me as to why we had to add an extra class instead of just keeping it like it was, and your smaller schools just stay where they were, like, and bring Ripley to AA.
Well, Coach, everything was done on enrollment, from my understanding, right? This new system, you bring things in like how close are you to the county seed, all these different things. And I truly, truly believe that was done to pull those private schools up out of the single A, or try to get as many of them out as they could to give the small, rural schools a chance. And the formula they came up with, I understand that they tweaked that as of late. The initial formula needed work. Like I said, I don't have any idea what being close to a county seat has to do with like your classification. I think they
Right.
tweaked, but I think it was to initially give those smaller schools more of a chance, because, we take this for granted. GW has been in the state tournament before me. They played for 5 and 1-3 and been there many times. I know guys that have coached for 20 years that have never made the state tournament. So sometimes I think that gets taken for granted. So, but I think it was give those smaller schools a chance to get there and experience the magic, quote unquote, the magic.
So using what Coach Lemaster just said, Coach Kennedy, I'll go to you because he mentioned that magic. You guys definitely seized that opportunity. You guys have made the state tournament for the first time in your tenure as a head coach. You guys made it to the state semifinals, as you mentioned, as have I. But talking about that magic, when you start looking at this from a small school perspective, I know you guys are one of the larger schools or middle of the pack in class AAA, but from that perspective, how neat was it? What was the magic like for you guys going through that magical run with this new 4-class system?
Yeah, as I'm sitting here and you're talking about it, I've got chill bumps sitting here thinking about it, and all the amazing memories that I've got with the girls, and just an awesome experience. And I know Coach Jones, he's sitting here and probably thinking about, all the times in his state title run, and Coach Lemaster. It's just a special time for not only the girls, but, I know I've mentioned about our community. It's just extremely awesome, when you think about everything that goes into it. And I'm going to, jump back here a little bit. When we were in the MSAC, we were battling just to finish 500, and it takes time. And, I'm going to even back up even further. But like Coach Lemaster was saying, at Ripley, these players cycle, and you may have 2 or 3 good years, and then you may be down for 4, 5, 8, 9, 10 years before you get another group of kids come through that are, athletic, talented, and you've got parent support behind them. So we've been extremely fortunate here of late. And, after next season, we're going to be back into the rebuilding mode, and it's going to take a couple of years to, grow those younger kids and hopefully get them down in the state tournament as well.
Coach Jones, I'll go back to you because you obviously spoke out against having a 4-class system. What would you do differently? I mean, obviously the easy default answer is we'll just go back to 3 classes, but obviously it seems like it's going to be around for a while. It seems, according to multiple reports, it's going to be expanding out into other sports across the state of West Virginia. Just what would you do differently with this 4-class system?
I mean, I don't think there's anything you can really do differently 4-class wise. I mean, it is what it is. I just don't think there's enough teams, in the state for 4 classes. And I wasn't trying to shoot down, Ripley or anything like that when I was saying, what I was saying, but I think we could have kept it at 3 classes and just brought, Ripley and Bridgeport to AA, but I understand what Coach Lemaster said about, the private schools and, the St. Joe's and things like that. And, the runs that they had and giving the other people. I mean, there's so many different ways you can look at everything. I mean, but I mean, I just kind of look at it as though it was the SSAC's opportunity to, sell more tickets, an extra day at the Civic Center. But what do I know? I just coach basketball. I don't know how they come up with some of the things they come up with, just like we don't know the answers and we won't know the answers to this transfer portal. It's all going to be hit or miss for a while. We're going to mess up. SSAC is going to mess up. A player and their parents are going to mess up. I don't think you're going to see a lot this year. I think next year is when you're going to see more of your moves and things, actually. So it'll be interesting, though.
You coach basketball?
They say I do. I think I just yell.
And that's a very valid statement. That's a very valid
Yeah.
statement. Well, moving along, I think we're talking about just, and I know Coach Lamaster mentioned this, with bringing in these new schools into the state tournament. Obviously, we've had a lot of different champions during this 4-class system, which leads into our next topic, and that's the state tournament. And Coach Lamaster, I'll start with you with this because, again, this is something I've wrestled with in regards to figuring out what the best way to continue to bring fans into the state tournament. I know, obviously, the state tournament has a good number of an older demographic, and obviously, there's going to be, just not to sound too dark, but there's going to come a time where they're not going to be there. I'm sorry, but it's just that's just the way it is. So, my question to you is, Coach Lamaster, and that is, do you think it would be necessary? I don't know if necessary is the right word to use, but do you think it would be helpful? I think that's a better word. Do you think it would be helpful if the state tournament moved out of Charleston just to try and get a spark back into it for this younger demographic to feel the energy, to feel the enthusiasm?
Well, that's a great question because I think there's a lot of different levels to that question regarding the state tournament. Okay, so you mentioned, are we locked into Charleston just because it's always been to Charleston? I think maybe moving the tournament around from different sites could be beneficial. But truthfully, there are some old timers out there, as you've mentioned. You hear these guys, I've made the last 50 state tournaments. I haven't missed one. Today's younger generation is so locked into technology with streaming and Twitter and TikToks and different things. I can know who won the game before they even finish the post-game show, or I can watch it online. So there's a lot of things there. So do you move it around? I don't know what you do there. But moving forward in the second level of that question is, there's 2 words I'm going to use here. The best 8 or regional representation, because you can't have it both ways. So currently we have what's called regional representation. If you take the state of West Virginia and you draw a vertical line, and a horizontal line, we take 2 teams from each piece of the pie. Regional representation. Is that the best 8 teams getting there? I'm not sure. And furthermore, this current path to get there, when I was coming up, if you lost a sectional game, a final game, or something, you're out. That was it. You're done. Teams got to regionals. At that time, regions rotated. It wasn't 1 play 8, so they went away from the regional thing and they went to the seeding it. So the other side of that is, away from representation, the best 8. I think you draw a line across the state, north-south, and you seed, and you play 8 teams up north, you play 8 teams down south. The best 4 from the north come out, the best 4 from the south come out, and you seed it. So the question is, and I'll leave it up to these other guys, do you want the best 8 for, maybe the big games, excitement, big time, or do you want regional representation maybe for the teams that don't get there all the time? So it's a real slippery slope there, what you want to do. And I'm not sure what the answer is. I do know that in this system currently, it seems to work itself out where the 2 of the better teams will make it, but we see these early 40-point blowout games. Is that what we want to see in a state tournament? I'm not sure. So, do you want regional representation or do you want the best 8 by seeding? I'm not sure what the answer is there. So I'll leave it to these other 2 guys to figure that one out.
Well, I'm going to agree with you. When it comes to the state tournament, yeah, it's nice that there's regional representation, but like you said, Coach Masters, is that the best 8? And I think that if you're going to play in the state tournament, all the fans across the state for girls and boys basketball want to see the best play and not have those, first round games to where you're getting teams out there losing by 30 and 40 points. So I like your idea of where you're going to, take the top 4 or the top 8, play it out, seed it, and then do the same thing for the South. And then you're really getting into the better quality of the competition when you're playing in the state tournament.
And I think, Coach, that's going to draw crowds because they're going to want to come see those games. And on the other side of that, I'll be completely transparent. We made the state tournament 2 years ago, shouldn't have been there, upset Green Berets, and got blasted by Huntington by 40. So that wasn't a good game for anybody to watch, including myself. So, you know, I see both sides of it.
Coach Jones, anything to add?
Oh no, I agree 100% with them. I mean, I know everybody's gonna. I mean, they're gonna laugh when I've been. And Coach Kennedy's gonna agree with me. I mean, we've got 5 of the top 10 states in one region, and you only take 2 out. I think that's. I don't think it's fair. I mean, obviously, I coach at Nitro, and we're probably one of those top 5 teams. But you know, you've got 5 teams in Ripley, Logan, Winfield, Nitro, and Wayne, and you only get 2 of those schools to get to go to the state tournament. You got 3 schools that were in your top 10 basically all season long that are watching from the stands, which I understand. You know, if you're good enough to get there, you'll get there. But then you got some of these sectionals and regionals out here that, I mean, they're a struggle. And then exactly like Coach LeMaster said, you get to these first round games and you got blowouts. I don't know if I agree with him on the splitting it in half part and doing that. I mean, I think just like football, you take your top 16 teams and you play your first round games at home, higher seed plays at home, and then you got your top 8 teams going to the state tournament.
Right, I agree with you. Just however you do it, like you seed it somehow and play that
Right.
off.
Yeah, I mean, I think you. I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's any more different numbers in football than there is basketball. There may be some schools may not have a football or have basketball or vice versa, but I think that, you know, if football can represent the top 16 teams, and you know, obviously they get down and they play one game for a state championship in Wheeling. I mean, I don't see why you don't do your top 16 in girls basketball and boys basketball, and then whoever wins, you got your top 8, and then I think every game in the state tournament is going to draw a crowd because you're going to have your top 8 teams, and possibly, I mean, there could be an upset, but you're going to have at least your top 16 teams in the state competing to win a state championship. And you're not going to have in the first round, you know, a 1 seed playing, I mean, realistically, a 28 seed that could have pulled off an upset or something. You know what I mean? And it's also going to make some of these teams that, you know, aren't in your top 16 work harder during the season to get that opportunity to try to get that 16th or, you know, 15th or 14th or whatever seed to get that opportunity. I just think that if you want to draw a bigger crowd and a younger crowd, I think the better the competition, the bigger the crowd.
Coach, you just hit the nail on the head. Let me use this as an example. In football, they take the top 16. So if you lose 3 games, 4 games, 5 games, you're starting to sweat a little bit, right? I mean, you may not make it, right? Currently in basketball, every team makes postseason, at least for 1 game. I don't care if you're 0-22. Would that not make the regular season seem a little bit more important, a little bit more competitive? You understand what I'm saying?
I agree. Yep.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that.
Also, before we continue, I just want to go on record and say this. I was not, if you would have told me before we started this, or even during the course of this, that Coach LeMaster would have mentioned TikTok, I would have been a very rich man. I probably would have hammered it.
He probably has a TikTok page.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Do not, but I just created a Facebook 2 weeks ago, so I'm trying to catch up.
I did see that. I whenever I got the request, I said, "Oh, now he's getting into the 21st century." Okay.
I thought he got hacked. I had to wait to see how many friends we had in common before I jumped on it.
People sent to me and said, "Is this legit? Scam? Is this really you?" Yeah, it's really me. That happened.
Oh
Proud
man,
of you. You're growing up.
Well, and I think that kind of brings up another good topic of discussion. I know I didn't mention this to you guys, but this is more towards Coach Kennedy because he had mentioned it earlier. That's the social media side of things. I think social media has really propelled a lot of different things in the state. I think and there was something that I think it was on Max Preps, I think it was, but they gave the top 10 greatest boys basketball players according to AI, and one of the players was the logo Jerry West. So even though that's a small sample size, you always see people going on social media saying, hey, West Virginia kids are severely overlooked or they're underappreciated or whatever it is. But Coach Kennedy, just kind of asking you mentioned how you're trying to get into the swing of things with social media and everything else. But from your standpoint, how beneficial has it been to promote your team, promote what you're doing, and just promote the program that you've been building in your tenure?
We started really pushing it there a couple years ago with the help of couple supporters here and some parents and some fans that it's just exploded. The recognition that these girls get, our program gets, and I'm extremely thankful for having that support from our community and parents. And it's only going to grow for not only Ripley High School, but for Coach Jones and Coach Masters. I mean, both of them do an excellent job promoting their program. And as I just touched on there earlier with you guys, I mean, we had an opportunity to go there down to West Virginia State University and talk about our girls, our program. And, it got put out on Twitter, and then it got shared to Facebook, and you've got parents that are shooting you a text and saying, hey, it was a nice job. And, just the social media element of everything with girls basketball, I definitely think that West Virginia, like you had mentioned there earlier, is having a moment there, and we're just, enjoying the ride, and, extremely thankful for where social media is and how much it's helped us here at Ripley.
Crystal Master, going to you about social media, what feedback, because you guys do have a good following on social media, as does Nitro and as Ripley, but from your all standpoint, how beneficial has it been for you all just to push out even just the littlest of things? Hey, tonight, 7:30, we're playing South Charleston, or hey, we're playing Cabell Midland or Spring Valley, or whomever it may be. How beneficial has that been for you guys over these last couple of years?
Well, again, it's been very beneficial. We do have a Twitter page, and we do have a Facebook page, not run by me, but we're able to get a lot of things out there, a lot of things we're going to preseason, and basically it's advertising your program is what it is. But I'll go back a step. I came from way back, even when I started coaching, when there was no social media, and then the theme was, if you're good enough, they will find you, right? This has just given so many players so many more opportunities to be located, be seen. You can go out there, and it's just a way of life now. You have all these travel teams with their social media, and the high school teams with their social medias, and I think for the most part, I don't like a lot of things I see on social media, but I am involved with a lot of athletic people, and I think that's run really clean. And I think that's a great platform, not to get up and be political and talk about your views, but from our standpoint and what we're using it for, it's a great way to get your athletes recognized, promote them, promote your programs. And I think it's a way of life. Again, my first experience with technology was the old AT&T phones were about 3 inches thick, and you had to push the number 1 3 times to get to the letter C. So it's grown so much. And it's just a great way to, promote your kids, promote your programs, and recognition for these kids. And they go into their travel ball, and they're being recognized. And the days of a coach coming to a college coach coming to a high school gym with a notepad, that's over. They can get on any social media platform and see about what they need to see. But with that said, we also do caution our kids with their social media is about being clean on it, because people do look at that. And if you're putting pictures of yourself out there, maybe the party after prom on Saturday, and you've got a drink in your hand, tilting one up, that's not a good look, man. And I know a lot of colleges will look at that, and universities, and that'll turn them off right now. So it's a great platform, but you just have to use it in the right way and be very careful with how you're representing yourself.
All I'm saying is this: if people are doing like a bingo card and everybody's trying to think about like what Lamaster's going to say next, he just gave you a 3-inch AT&T phone. I did not have that on my bingo card today. So if you did,
you didn't have one of those phones either, so don't worry.
That's why I got one of these. So no, I think that's a really interesting take. But Coach Jones, I'll go to you because you're the youngest guy in this group. You played at Capitol High School. When you look back at when you played, obviously you played with some terrific talent. You guys won a state title your senior season. What do you think social media would have looked like for the state of West Virginia, especially on the boys basketball side, back whenever you played?
Pat, I'm gonna jump. I wonder if there's any social media you went in a dunk contest at Capitol High School.
I don't want to think about social media back in my day. I mean, not that we did anything crazy or anything, but I agree with Coach LeMaster, and I tell my girls all the time, you're always on stage. It doesn't matter where you're at or what you're doing. You could be sitting at an Outback Steakhouse and, you know, talking about a party or something. There could be a college coach at the booth behind you overhearing everything you're saying. So I always tell my girls, you know, you're always on stage. It doesn't matter where you're at, whether it's social media or out in public, you know, be respectful and, you know, just don't do anything stupid. But back in my day, I couldn't imagine social media. I don't even remember. I had the dial-up AOL account with instant messenger. You know, I mean, I'm showing my age a little bit. So, I really couldn't imagine social media back then, just because, I mean, I see how it is now. And I mean, everything is basically overran with social media between your Facebooks, your Twitters, your Instagram, your TikToks. I mean, no matter what you're doing, you basically have a phone in your hand and you're staring at something on the screen of it. I mean, every Sunday I get a notification about my time usage on my phone, and I feel like every Sunday it goes up. So, but I think social media has basically taken over everything. And I also think that's one of the reasons why girls basketball has taken off as much as it has. Because, you know, back in the day, we didn't have anything to say, you know, get on there and take a picture and post it and say, want to thank, we'll say, University of Charleston for, you know, a great visit and offering me you know, an opportunity to come there and play. We didn't have any of that. So, you know, if we had anything posted, it was the news interviewing us or the newspaper interviewing us. There was no social media to run and post to, you know, explain our honors or show our honors.
I'd say that if we had social media between all three of us, we probably wouldn't be sitting here right now.
100%.
Fact.
But, you know, just to piggyback on what you guys said, you know, back when we played, like you said, Coach Jones, there was an article in a newspaper or, you know, an interview here or there. That's where you found your information from. And it's everywhere. It's in the hallways of all of our schools, you know, after school restaurants, you know, dances, and these girls are always in the spotlight, and they just always got to be very cautious of what they put out there. And I'll tell our girls, I said, you know, when you post anything, it's got to be positive, you know.
I agree.
So I know this is not a great transition, but I know Coach Jones mentioned earlier about these flex days, and I think it brings up an interesting point. And I know I've talked to Coach LeMaster on this podcast before, and I'm always interested to hear his stance with this. But since there's now something to where I think with these flex days, you all get 32 now. At this point, you guys are just thinking, well, why can't we just have an open off season and just have as much time as possible with our team? Coach Kennedy, what are your thoughts with that?
Well, I don't think it's changed that much from the 3-week period, and then, you know, the 12 days that we had there last season. You know, I think it's going to flow very, very similar than as it did in previous years. But I do agree with your statement there about kind of opening things up a little bit more for high school coaches to be with their kids. You know, we've got all of us have girls that play travel ball, and our hands are kind of tied, you know, outside of season. And thankfully, you know, all of us sitting here, if it wasn't for our parents, you know, giving up their time and helping us out, our programs wouldn't be where they are. And it has to have that parent support. I would like to see it open up a little bit more for us and catch up with some of our surrounding states, not only in the off season, but as Coach LeMaster put out there in an article there, I think it might have been last year about Kentucky. I know that, you know, Coach Faulkner, I coached with here a few years ago. Now he's assistant coach down at Pikeville, and those kids are able to play starting in the 7th grade. And those kids are getting so much more practice time with their high school teams, more games. And, you know, I think that's where West Virginia needs to kind of go to.
Coach LeMaster, kind of along those lines, like, again, going back to that article, I know that we had talked, but for people that don't know your stance with this, kind of explain why you feel like as West Virginia schools, it's almost you're going into a disadvantage when you do play a school from Kentucky or Virginia or Ohio that does have a lot more opportunity and time with their team.
Well, first off, to refer to the article and things, it did have to do with Kentucky, and at that time and still currently, I do play Kentucky schools, and people say, "Well, you're at a disadvantage. Don't play them." Well, I like to play them because it's great competition. But some of the differences are right off the bat is the number of games they're allowed to play. I think we max at 22 in the regular season. They could be close to 30. um, Also, they generally have a 2 to 3 week jump on us from the time they start practice. And I think the biggest one is a kid, if they have the talent, can come up as a seventh grader and then play, seventh, eighth, and then 4 years. They get 6 years of high school basketball. I mean, that's tremendous. I'm currently in a county where Kanawha has, I'm going to guess 13, 14 middle schools, maybe. It's very spread out, and there's just, there's a kid or two here and there. But what an advantage it would be for me at GW if I saw a kid at John Adams that I thought was a future, talent, and bring them up and go ahead and get them within my system and play them at the higher level, just like an AAU and travel ball kids can play up an age group. I think that really helps to challenge the kid and develop the kid. And again, I think the SSAC, to their credit, is making progress towards giving us some more of that. I know next year, this is the last year for the 3-week period. We're going to do away with that. And we're going to go to, I think it's 30 flex days, maybe. And you can use those at your discretion, maybe 32. So, but I think a lot of that, quite honestly, was driven by football, for football to be able to use flex days and have quote unquote spring ball. I think that's where the drive from that was, to have those flex days to be able to use that in the springtime so that the coaches at the collegiate level can get out and see these kids. So I think that's kind of where that drive was. I also like it because it spreads it out more, because currently in the 3-week period, my 3-week period may not be the same as Jackson County's 3-week period. So if we want to host a shootout or something, he say, "Coach, we don't start till next week," or, "Sorry, Coach, we finished last week." There was no uniformity across the state with it. So I'm probably a fan of having the 32 days and using them how I want to. And that's just my take on that. I think it'll be more beneficial.
Coach Jones, kind of, we keep talking about this concept of time, with you all having more time with your team. We keep mentioning Kentucky and the structure that they have. And I know Coach LeMaster just mentioned more games. Do you think it would be beneficial for the state of West Virginia if basketball teams there's an increase in games, regular season games for you all?
Yeah, but if you do that, I think you have to spread out the season and make it longer, because I think a lot of us are already playing, 2 and 3 games a week in some areas. And I think by, putting more games on the schedule, you're risking injury if you're putting too many games in 1 week. Like, I know it was 2 years ago. I think they started the COVID season, I call it. That was the year we won the state championship. I think they started it in like the middle to end of January, maybe. And I think we played 19 games in like a month. Because the state tournament, well, maybe it was 2 months, because the state tournament, I think, ran until like the end of March. So we were squeezing 3 and 4 games in. And then, if a player got COVID or a team had to cancel games, then you're trying to squeeze another makeup game in there from that canceled game. And I think it just risks the girls getting injured. But I think that if you're going to do that, you need to start the season maybe at the beginning of November and run it to the end of February, and then start your sectionals in March. Just to, give your girls and boys an opportunity to, rest their legs. You're not risking injuries and things like that. But no, I'll be all for it. I think the more games, the merrier. It won't affect, my wife won't be happy, but I'd be completely okay with, more games.
Yeah, but Coach Jones, that's exactly what Kentucky's done. They start before us, and by the time we're done, they're still playing. So they've stretched their season long to get.
Yeah, so
that.
I'm all for it. I think it would be great. I think it'd be beneficial for the girls and the boys. I really do, because you're getting an opportunity to get out there more, and it gives college coaches an opportunity to see these kids more often too, than besides just in travel ball.
Coach Kennedy, it seems like you want to add something to that.
No, I'm good. I'm just agreeing with what Coach Jones was saying. I agree with both those guys, where, start that season a little bit earlier there in October, and open up their beginning of November or something like that. So I really
I think your biggest issue though, if you do that though, it's going to interfere not on the girls' side. Maybe with soccer, but with boys' side, you're going to have football, because football runs until almost middle to end of November, I think.
It goes the first week of December.
Does it? So yeah. So see, that's kind of, and like this year we open up November the 30th, so the boys will open up the week right after that. So that's right after your state championship. So if you add, you say 7 or 8 more games onto their schedule, you're gonna be in the middle of football season, practicing football, and then going to basketball practice or a basketball game.
It may be worthwhile to visit with Kentucky and because I don't know this answer, and see their structure and see how they do it. Their dates, how they do things up. I think that would be a worthwhile conversation for our governing body with theirs.
So as much as I've enjoyed this, I think this whole idea of kind of looking at the structure of what Kentucky does, I think that leads me into the final topic I want to talk about. And this is for everybody, kind of a fun little topic. And that is, just put yourself in the shoes of the executive director of the SSAC. Obviously it's held by Bernie Dolan right now, who's set to retire, obviously. But if you were to be the executive director, what would you do differently? What would you change? Coach Master, you start.
I was going to tease the other and disband it. No, I'm teasing on that one, but I think I would have to go back to looking at how we qualify teams for the state tournament. Again, I think if I had a job for a day, the first thing I'd want to do is, and I'm speaking from a selfish basketball standpoint, is just the way that teams make the journey to Charleston. I think that'd be the number one thing I'd look at. Like you said, bringing some energy back to the tournament, trying to figure out how we do those type of things. And everybody's going to have an opinion or a way, but I think I lean to the side of getting the best 8 teams there. And I think that would draw crowds. I think that draw excitement, and you would have a lot of high level basketball being played on boys and girls. So I think that from my standpoint, selfishly basketball, and I can't speak for other sports because I don't coach any other sport now, but I think that's something I'd take a look at.
Coach Kennedy, what do you think?
Well, I've got to agree with Coach Masters, but I network like crazy, and these guys know that. I've picked Coach Jones's brain before, and Coach Masters on opponents. But the first thing I would do is I would get with with the directors of Kentucky, Ohio, and the rest of our surrounding state, and just set up a meeting with them and say, let me see how you guys do yours with your boys and girls basketball, and then from there, then go back to the SSAC, and here's some ideas that I've got. And then collectively sit down with the other board members, and even involve some coaches there and say, hey, here's what we're thinking. So I would get out there and try to network with the other organizations that surround us to get some ideas and feedback on how they run their boys and girls basketball.
Coach Jones, you have the final word.
Never good. No, I agree with what Coach LeMaster said and Coach Kennedy said, on the state tournament pairings and things like that, and getting your top teams down there just for the better competition. But you'll probably laugh when I say this, and it may not even be Bernie that does this, but I know he knows who does do it. But I think high school coaches in the state of West Virginia deserve a raise. I feel like the time, the energy, the effort, not just with the girls and time, but the time we spend away from our family, for games, for practices, for fall leagues, for shootouts, for 3-week periods. I think if you broke that down into the time we spent into what we make an hour, it's pennies. And I would say we probably spend it all in gas getting to and from a gym or to and from a game. And I think if you would go back and look, I bet it was probably the early 1990s to late 1980s, the last time coaches got a raise in the state of West Virginia. And I'm not saying that Bernie does that. I mean, and listen, hats off to Bernie, because he deals with a lot. He's got a lot in this state to deal with sports. He don't just deal with girls basketball. There's a lot of sports and a lot of things that he has to be present for and so forth. But I think me personally, the first thing I want to look at is, why are coaches making such little money? And it could just be Kanawha County that's, paying their coaches little money. I don't know what, Putnam County, I don't know what Jackson County, I have no idea. But I can almost guarantee you with the time, the effort, and everything that these coaches put in, because I know both of these coaches and myself, we don't like to lose. So we're going out, we're scouting teams, we're breaking down film, we're spending time away from our family, and we don't even make $2,000. So I think that as coaches, we deserve a little bit more money. I know for a fact, I saw someone posted on Twitter the other day, there was a girls coach's job in Texas, and the salary was $99,000. Now, I'm not saying I deserve $99,000, but I deserve more than the pennies that, we're making as high school coaches.
Well said, Coach.
I was going to say that's a very strong way to end it.
My bad.
There's not to be ashamed of. I think you all hit a lot of great things. As always, I appreciate your time. You guys, I'm glad that I chose you three because I think you guys provided a lot of perspective and a lot of knowledge in regards to, social media, the transfer portal, 4-class system, and now obviously what you would do differently. But, as always, I appreciate each of your time. Obviously, I think I am very appreciative of each of our relationships. So thank you for your time. I know we're pushing right at 9:30 because we're recording this on Tuesday. This is getting posted on Wednesday. So I do appreciate everybody's time, and thanks for joining on this inaugural girls basketball roundtable.
Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, that will conclude episode 144 of Hoops Across the Mountain State. Again, I'm your host, Taylor Kennedy, signing off. You can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7 for all the latest about this podcast. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube as well. I'll be back next week for our boys basketball roundtable. We'll be joined by 3 more head coaches here in the state of West Virginia, so you will not want to miss that. Subscribe. Again, follow it wherever you get yours, and I will see you all then. This has been Hoops Across the Mountain State.